Hello, in this video I'm going to talk a bit about this 3D printed model that I painted. It's called the Twisted Tower. It's by Kijai and I've got a link to the free STL in the description below. I'm just going to talk a bit about how I painted it, and I didn't add any embellishments to this particular model. Usually I do, but it just didn't feel right with this one. So yeah, about the painting. First of all, I guess I should mention this print. It can print all as one piece or as two separate pieces. This particular one was printed in two separate pieces, and basically they just locked together. This is held together without any glue or anything. It was such a perfect and snug fit that it just locked in place, and that was pretty cool. So yeah, usually if things are in pieces, I'll paint them separately and then put them together last. But for this particular model, I stuck it together and it pretty much wouldn't come apart again, so it just got painted as one piece. The first thing I do with all my models is I prime them. I always use a brush and I prime them with just a thin layer of acrylic paint. Usually grey. It's kind of my favorite go-to color for priming, I guess. Helps me use up a lot of excess white paint that I've got. After I've primed it, and this had a lot of surface area, I allowed it to dry for a day. Another thing that's probably important to mention is there's lots of little crevices in here, and it's important that when you're priming, you don't make your primer color or mixture too thick, because you will start to fill in all these little grooves, and you don't want that because they work to your advantage when you're painting them later. So yeah, after that was all dry for about a day, I went back in and I started adding color. The base was just going to be grey, so I didn't actually add any additional color to it. The top, I realized that, of course, all these little crevices I just mentioned were filled in with grey, and I wanted them to be darker. So I went straight to a wash on this instead of blocking in colour again. And that was a black wash. It got into all these grooves, and I let that dry completely. On the base, I believe I added a brown wash and a black wash. I didn't really know where I was going with it, so I just kind of put it on there and let it all dry to see what it looked like, and then I went forward. So after the washes were down, those are your shadows. You move on to your highlights. And for this model, I wanted to highlight all of these little facets in the stone. There are a lot of them. Just all these little ridges. It makes it look quite natural, quite eroded and weathered, and it's really quite a beautiful model. But I wanted to highlight those so they really stood out. These white bits you're seeing aren't just reflecting the light. Those are all highlights that I added in. But before I could add in those final highlights, I needed to I wanted to add some algae to the stone, so you can probably see here better than in the still photos I've got in my blog that there's quite a bit of green there. And I just kind of brushed that on with a dry brush, right on the grey. And it's not much lighter than the grey, but you can definitely see that it's there. I also dry brushed green onto the tower. And the dry brushing was several layers. So the first layer was the green, then I started getting into the lighter greys, and there's also some dry brushed brown in here as well. On the stairs, they were just treated with a black wash all over, and then a very, very light dry brush up the steps to highlight the ridges of the steps. Now for The tower itself, I treated the stairs the same way. They had the wash applied and then just a very light dry brush to bring out all the stairs. It's a very simple but very effective technique. And after I had the green on there, everything was just the same color. It was just gray and green and brown. I needed to distinguish the top from the bottom a bit more, and I decided to go for purple. Not quite sure what inspired that. It just seemed to work. And again, as you can see here, much better than in photos. There is metallic purple dry brushed and highlighted onto the tower itself. And it ended up looking really, really cool. It gave it a little bit of a wet look. And I think there's a little bit of white dry brushed on top of that after it was dry. The windows are just highlighted around the windows with grey to make those stand out a bit. And that's really all I did to this model. Yeah, it's just a really beautiful model. I didn't want to cover it up with anything. Nothing just seemed right. I thought about lichen, but it didn't work for me. I'm really happy with it just as it is. And it was an incredibly simple paint job, but done in a lot of layers. So it was time consuming, but worth it in the end, I think. And that's all. Bye.